For our next video, we're actually going to learn how to sample poorly, very bad ways of sampling. These are things you want to avoid, and they will ask you about these poor examples on the AP exam. So let's start with what a convenience sample is and what's the problem with convenience samples. Choosing individuals from the population who are easy to reach is a convenience sample. This often leads to underrepresented data. So a great example of this is you'll see sometimes on late night talk shows, they'll just walk outside the front of their theater and just survey people on the street. Just randomly, well, they say random, but they pick people on the street. That is, just walking outside the school and interviewing the first few people you see. That's a convenience sample. All right, so this leads to underrepresented data, which is what leads to the definition of bias. Bias is when a statistical study consistently over or underestimates a value that we are measuring, or over or represents individuals or types of individuals in our study. So that's another way to do it, or way to explain it. But bias should never be confused with discrimination. Bias just means that there's something going on with our study that is giving us the wrong values or not a good representation of the population. So be really careful. I think we often use bias, especially in the media. When they talk about bias, they act like we're doing, it's done on purpose. Bias is not always done on purpose. It can be, but it's not often. So you want to be really careful. So I'm going to give you an AP tip. When you have questions on the AP exam, what should you be explaining? On the AP exam, if you are asked how a study leads to bias, you need to do these two things. First, identify some problem with the design of the study. And two, explain how that leads to over or underestimation. We're going to look at some examples in a moment that will make more sense. What is voluntary response what is a voluntary response sample? And is this a good method for obtaining a sample? Voluntary response samples consist of people or individuals who choose themselves by responding to an invitation to do a survey. Usually only people with strong opinions or those with spare time respond. If you think about it, people with spare time are usually retired, so if we're doing a survey, we tend to get older people who do a lot of these surveys, so that definitely over or underestimates what the response looks like, and that definitely could lead to bias. The other people who always respond to surveys are AP Stats teachers, because we feel like it's our duty. So yes, I always fill out surveys because I feel like I'm contributing to the data, and I probably should. So just so you know. But definitely voluntary response samples are not the best way to do sampling. All right, let's look at some examples on the next page. So the directions here are just like our AP tip. It says, for the following situations, identify the sampling method used and then explain how it can lead to bias. So let's take a look at the first one. Definitely this first example is a convenience sample. So convenience, I always hate spelling convenience. I'm always worried. Okay, so this is convenience sampling. Because this is the worst inspector ever, they don't even bother to look at the bottom of the crate. Okay, so, and if the farmer knows this, okay, the farmer could be just putting the best oranges at the top of the crate. which leads to an underrepresentation of the spoiled oranges or the damaged oranges. Boy, if I knew a guy was doing that, sure, I'd put all my best ones on top. All right. So I'm going to speed this up so you don't have to sit and watch me wait. So to finish answering question like this, the farmer could be putting the best oranges on the top of the crate, thus the damaged or spoiled oranges would be underestimated. So it led to an under or an overestimation. For the next problem, the ABC program Nightline once asked whether the United Nations should continue to have its headquarters in the United States. Viewers were invited to call one telephone number to respond yes and another one for no. There was a charge for calling either number. More than 186,000 callers responded and 67% said no. So for this one, it's definitely a voluntary response sample. Because people had to call in themselves. They were not approached. Okay. So since this was voluntary only, only people passionate about this one would probably respond. So let me fill this one in and we'll talk about the answer. So since this was voluntary, mostly people with a strong opinion would respond. And usually people don't respond to the status quo or what is already true. So it's already true that the United Nations are headquartered in the United States. So the yeses will actually be underestimated. It's people who usually have a strong opinion that want to change something are the ones that would call in more than not. Also, because there's a charge, also people who can afford it are going to call in. So that's another problem with this that would lead to definite bias there. All right, so for number 3, I want you to read through it and see what you come up with and let me know. This problem was about family opinion or that were about cuts to an athletic department, and the principal of a school surveyed people going to the football game. So of course this is a convenience sample, and by surveying families attending the game, they are more likely to get responses that would be opposed to the budget cuts. So definitely leading to bias. All right, let me know if you have any questions on this section, and we are going to wrap it up.